in any case, this is an exciting conference for me because I learned that you had worked on that Joseph had worked on Stendhal, and it's one of the pieces in my title. And the focus on indigenous rights is an issue that is central to much of my work as well. So I'll begin. I will start reading some work. Oh, I should do one of these, shouldn't I? How do I do it? Oh, forward. Okay, that's me. Those of you from Indonesia, I would like you to explain to me a little bit, Lumbung, but we'll get to that at another point. I'll start by reading a couple of pages, and then I'll go into some images, and it'll become a much more freewheeling thing. But at the beginning, I want to read these pieces because the parts of text, because they are, I think, key and central to what Jeffrey had to say, and what I central to most of my writing. Okay, to begin, Italia, O Italia, thou hast the fatal gift of death and beauty. That's Lord Byron talking about his fascination with the country of Italy. There were many people who were focused on Italy. Stendhal, the next name up there, a few years earlier, wrote, and I was going to cut this quote, but I guess I'll continue it in English, mind you. This is Stendhal saying, I underwent the profoundest experience of ecstasy that, as far as I am aware, I ever encountered through the painter's art, affected by the very notion of being in Florence. Absorbed in contemplation of sublime beauty, I could perceive its very essence close at hand. I had attained at that supreme degree of sensibility where divine intimations of art merge with the impassioned sensuality of emotions, where the divine intervention, I'm not reading this very well, divine intimations of the art merge with the impassioned sensuality of emotion. As I emerged from the porch of Santa Croce, the Basilica of Santa Croce, I was seized with a fierce palpitation of the heart. The wellspring of life was dried up and within me, and I walked with constant fear of falling to the ground. He was so overtaken by the artwork that he was viewing. And this, to a certain degree, sort of sets up the expectation of art. Have any of you gone to Italy with that sort of, got to see all of this art, got to look at the Michelangelo, got to look at, the David painting images and all? Watch out for that. I'll go on. So many people experience the kind of ecstatic relation to the artwork that he viewed and had experiences like that. It became a medical syndrome. It's called, characterized, the name of it is Stendhal syndrome, that talks about the characters are, symptoms included rapid heartbeat, fainting, confusion, and even hallucinations. Usually occurred with individuals became exposed to objects, artworks, or phenomena of great beauty. I'm cutting, this is awkward reading because I had cut it earlier, but because you've mentioned your work with Stendhal, I better put it back in. This was a name syndrome documented by Graziella Magherini, a senior physician at Florence's Nuovo Maria Spedale. That's the major hospital near to the railroad station, if you know Florence. That hospital, by the way, was designed by Michelangelo. So they're like monuments of Italian artwork all over the place, which I can understand might drive someone to distraction. Generally speaking, contemporary Western art evolved. Oh, time to change this. There you go. Generally speaking, contemporary Western art evolves out of an expressive pictorial tradition that goes back to the 15th century Italy. Resulting outputs from this desire to control the visual image dominated what evolved into today's art market. Initially, exquisitely painted images of Christian figures seemed to impart some sort of godlike ability to the maker of these images. Moreover, exquisitely crafted, perspectively correct paintings allowed wealthy patrons the ability to have their likenesses painted into powerfully religious context. Wealthy patronage and personal ego gratification rewarded talented painters with great salaries, great deal of patronage, comfortable sponsorships, and handsome salaries. Name-branded artists like Michelangelo, Raphael, Da Vinci, Dürer, etc., were traded as symbols of wealth and accomplishment by patrons. In a sense, this system continues to this day, as you, I'm sure, can think of name-branded artists that are out there, whose works, what we were talking about, I can't remember the one that was $195 million. Which one was that? We were looking at a chart. Oh, maybe it was, I was talking with someone else about that. There's a Picasso that recently sold for $195 million. And then I know that just last month, a Van Gogh sold for $25 million, which is interesting because in his lifetime, he couldn't even sell his stuff. He couldn't even give it away. His brother Dale had difficulty selling his stuff. In any case, that is the power of the art market. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But what drove it is this fascination with perspective. Look at this one here on the right, and that's a pre-Renaissance painting. And then the other images deal with how Renaissance artists tried to make things work in perspective. Okay, it was the drive to have things in perspective, to give perspective meaning to something. These are two different organizing principles for the visual field. Just keep that in mind as we go through the rest of my talk. Okay. Generally speaking, the Western contemporary art. Oh no, I'm going to the next one. Okay, by the end of the 18th century, the obsession with pictorial realism abated somewhat as perspectively correct painting was perfected. I mean, they figured out how to do it. Let's see if we can get a better image. Next image. Okay, and this of course is Michelangelo. Everybody's doing this. I want to get to the next one. I mean, they figured out perspective. Okay, and so the late 18th century, they figured it out. There's you know, from perspective, we go all the way through to other imaging, you know, surrealism, and then there's abstract expressionism, and by the mid 20th century, we've moved into something completely different in the art scene. But the whole point of it was that it was always looking for the next thing. Okay, what's the latest fashion? What's the next thing that will be of some market value to a collector? Initially, it was the idea that that the patron could have himself painted into a very important religious document of some sort. But by the end of the 18th century, that had all changed. They'd figured out perspective painting, and photography came on board and ruined everything for those who were painterly. The perfected painterly image gave way to what I refer to as hermeneutically charged expressive trajectories, which is to say, lots of different interpretations came into play. If you think of the 18th century, late 18th century, what do you think of? You speak of it as the age of enlightenment, the age where things would, people beginning to interact with ideas. And those interactions oftentimes were ideologically driven. One of the fellows that I envy most is a fellow named Friedrich Schleiermacher, who invented the idea of interpretation, hermeneutics. Within that project, any position that you create works. You know, so you have romantics, you have the neoclassicists. The neoclassicists were the first ones to hit the scene in the 18th century. Then the romantics, and then you get the realists, and you know, psychologized realists, and you go forward and move into the Fauvists, and then it's impressionists, abstract impressionists, and you just keep going forward to you go through this cycle here, and you end up with that's a Korean artist named Namjoon Paik. I was told to emphasize Asian. So I end over there with a Korean artist named Namjoon Paik. That's Charlotte Moorman. He used Charlotte Moorman playing what is that? I guess it's kind of a viola, or cello. Okay, playing cello, but not really, with TV monitors and all. Okay, so what I'm saying here is that this progression of the new, always the latest fashion, carries forward to the mid-20th century. So let's see, I conclude this paragraph by saying, accordingly, the moody, nostalgic, expressionist, expressive naturalism of the late 18th century gave way to the forward march of visually, emotionally charged notions of the Romantics, the Neoclassicists, the Realists, all the way through that, all asserting novel value, novel visual programs, which were readily commodified for sale through the art galleries and such. Indeed, this visual plunder of ideas mirrored the growing Western European sense of intellectual superiority, which produced the thing called the Grand Tour. The Grand Tour was the thing that, up until the mid-20th century still, anyone who graduated university in Europe wanted to do the Grand Tour. You would go across Europe and admire art, which is the kind of setup that produced Stendhal and that group. I'm going to cut Charles Dickens because I took the Stendhal route instead. The point here is that it all fit into something that was happening that was kind of scary, and it kind of fits in with what Jeffrey was speaking of. And I will read this part because I sort of crafted a scary thing here. Herbert Spencer, British philosopher and sociologist, trumpeted social Darwinism with his scientific notions of natural selection and the survival of the fittest. Now armed with scientific justification, Spencer believed that the strong will flourish as societies evolve, and the weak will eventually die out, become extinct. Okay, here's where I become political. In 2018, Prime Minister of occupied Palestine clarified this position, clarified Spencer's position. The weak will crumble. The weak are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong survive. The strong are respected, and alliances are made with the strong, and in the end, peace is made with the strong. This is Netanyahu, 2018. In 1877, Cecil Rhodes, we all know who Cecil Rhodes is in the Rhodes Scholarships. We know what he had to say about such matters. I contend, Cecil Rhodes speaking, I contend we are the finest race in the world. And the more of the world we acquire, we help it becomes a better world, essentially, is what he's saying. It is our duty to seize every opportunity of acquiring more territory, and we should keep it in this one idea steadily before our eyes, that we are the honorable race of the world. Clearly, as was the case with all 19th and 20th century contexts, non-European peoples were looked down on. Indigenous peoples were not anything to be dealt with. By the mid-20th century, the modernist trajectory of European American art, with its relentless pursuit of the new, the latest novel artistic objects, the newest fashion thing, had reached the point of exhaustion. That could not be happenings and performance artists set about producing artworks that could not be purchased or hung on walls and be resold. Resold is an important part of this project. Artist John Baldessari set his paintings ablaze and declared, "I will not make any more boring art." Oh, I should have clicked a couple images here. Oh, okay, we're about to get there. Here then, the relentless, learned, linear trajectory of the modernist progression gave way to the notion that perhaps the more productive way forward might be to foster a postmodernist trajectory, encouraging artwork that ahistorically, randomly cannibalize the entire historical legacy of Western art history. Within this context, even works which allegedly sought to resist the acquisitive habits of the gallery owners and collectors and museums were quickly assimilated as DVD recordings of artworks, documentaries, NFTs, and AI-driven simulations were quickly appropriated. Above and beyond this, art gallery owners, collectors, and art directors and auction houses came to grips with an understanding that the world consisted of more than just their little collective West. And the nicely manicured offerings that the Euro-American tradition produced. Some asserted the need to exceed the limits of mere ethnic envy, and we should perhaps embrace the world instead of just Euro-American artwork. And so that became the next thing. So the sort of linear march forward of the isms replaced eventually here by postmodernism, which in turn was replaced by post-colonialism. But the very act of embracing and talking about it became a sort of new kind of colonization of the post-colonial tradition. So it's interesting to see how that works out. And here I'll move on then to, yeah, okay, I'm here now. As the art scene moved to embrace a sort of more diverse world, some interesting things happened. Someone living in New York or Paris could not get around the world to see what art he or she wanted to buy. So we begin to see the establishment of institutions that brought art or brought artwork together into things like this: the Venice Biennale, the Documenta. Are any of you familiar with Documenta or the Venice Biennale? No Documenta. Okay. Documenta is a series that began in the 1950s by a curator who wanted to start offering publicly the artwork of artists whom the Nazis felt were degenerate. Okay, so the Documenta set forth to provide access to degenerate art, or at least degenerate art according to the Nazis. And what that meant was modernist experimental artwork. And so they started doing this. Significantly, the last Documenta of the 20th century advocated a move towards a greater global view of the world. And that is where things started to change in, I think, significant ways. The first Documenta event of the 21st century was led by, was curated by an African American curator who changed the model. He actually he took a whole year in advance and blanketed the world with conferences and meetings and issues, raising issues and bringing things together that would impact the work that came to Documenta, the first Documenta of the 21st century. And that was considered a really great step forward. And so the next couple of Documentas were interesting in the sense that they showed increasingly the work of diverse artist groups from around the world. The Documenta, well, let's cut to the Venice first. The Venice Biennale of 2022 followed on the Venice Biennale of 2022. The Venice Biennale has always been a venue. Oh, the Documenta took place every 5 years. Venice Biennale is every 2 years. And the Biennale tended to be also very edgy in its work. But in 2022, one of the most interesting things about it was that they started doing something a little bit different. This was the first national pavilion at the Venice Biennale that showed work that focused on a minority group. The minority group being featured here are the Romani, the Roma. Sometimes they're referred to as gypsies. These were people who did not have geographic ownership of anything. And so this was really, that's me over there, but the point is that this is a Roma artist who literally redid or was inspired by Italian Renaissance work. And the program here is at the top you have mythological, the center you have astrological things, and the bottom you had everyday life. And so she she produced a work that did that. Okay, and let's see. Okay, that's the room with it was a really popular piece because it's the first time that the Venice Biennale had actually done anything that was not just about primarily white men. Okay. And then, hold on, just a minute, let's back up. How do I make it back up? Okay, this was in the Polish pavilion, and in the Greek pavilion was another work a pavilion is a huge space, okay, so it's a national gallery, and the one for Greece also did something about the Romi, and so and the challenges that Romani life offers to it, or the people had to suffer through. Okay. This was so these were pieces that were offered in the Venice Biennale of 2022. The next thing that I'm going to talk about, and this is for the Indonesians, the large Indonesian population here today. Oh, okay, this was the second one. Sorry, this was in the Greek pavilion. Okay. The Documenta of 2022 was a breakthrough Documenta. Unlike most Documentas, where there's a singular curator with maybe a small team of 5 or 6 advisors or helpers, this was a group that did not have a name. The name of this group actually did have a name. They called themselves Ruang and Artistic Team. Okay, the Ruang were then the curators of Documenta 22. They were a collective from Indonesia, from Jakarta primarily, but they represented, they were completely different from anything Documenta had ever done, where you had in the earlier curatorships, the work was pretty much easily defined. You could see the connections to the history of art. This stuff had nothing to do with the history of art, had nothing to do with the Western tradition. And let me see what I have here to say about them. They deployed their method of administration was called the Lumbung. Can someone tell me Indonesia? What is that? Lumbung. Yeah? Yeah, the rice house, the rice barn. And the idea was that they worked collectively as a community. It was not a curator that said, "Oh, this will occupy that space. You know, this is cool. That's not, but we'll keep it anyhow." Everything was included. Okay, where a typical Documenta in the previous editions would have maybe 150 artists, and the artists would have names. The artists of this Indonesian-driven Documenta, and this is one team, but there were like dozens and dozens of different teams, and the Lumbung was this collective decision process in which there were 1,500 participants in Documenta 15. Typically in the others, the previous, maybe 150. So 10 times the number of people. And the key thing about this was that they worked collaboratively. There was not one person that said, "This is the way we'll spend the budget." They all talked about it. Almost as in a rice barn, the idea, well, we've got so much rice, how shall we divvy it out? Let's talk about how we'll divvy it out. Let's see if I got a... Now, here's the process, the thinking process that occupied their decision-making. Okay? There were issues with their work. I have a lengthy description that I quote, but I think well, I'll read part of it. The collective deployed the Lumbung, a somewhat chaotic consultative process that engaged more than 1,500 participants, predominantly, but not exclusively, collectives from the global south. There were not individuals named. They were all collectives. Okay, I think that's a useful thing to think about, because the art world, you know, when you think about the art world, it's a name brand that you want. Here it's not. There are no Michelangelos or Van Goghs or Clifford Stills or whatever's. Instead, it was all a collective thing. A key part of it was art which pursues mere individual expression or which intends to be exhibited as a standalone object or sold to individual collectors or hegemonic state-funded museums is explicitly rejected. Okay, they were not into selling their stuff. What were they doing? Oh, I shouldn't, this is too fast. Okay. Oh, okay, I've done enough with that. Months before the opening, curators, artists at the, this is a quote, curators and artists at the renowned Documenta 15 exhibition faced a torrent of denunciation from the German government for hosting Palestinian collectives. Oh dear. Exhibits that supported Palestinian solidarity. They were subjected to major smear campaign by German media. Someone's writing about media. German media really took to beating them up. The festival's organizers were accused of anti-Semitism, primarily relating to issues around Palestinian Israel, leading many artists involved to believe that the quincentennial exhibition was doomed from the very start. The question of funding collective, TQOF, Tuqof, was accused of anti-Semitism, exhibiting Muhammad al-Hawari's, this stuff, Guernica, Gaza. Let's see if I'm not sure if these made it all together. Yeah, okay. Where he took images, incorporating images from famous paintings into the context of Palestinian life. I think in one of the earlier combined images, I had Delacroix's Liberty leading the people with the French flag. Here you have someone leading people and dead Palestinians all around. And she's wearing it. I'm sorry, this is getting me old. I'm very invested in this. Sorry. Give me a second. She's wearing a keffiyeh and carrying the Palestinian flag. Okay. Upon opening, the piece was the exhibition was instantly thrown into a can't find that part. Instantly exploded into scandal. I mean, when I write the text, it's easier. Sabine Schurman resigned her post as chief executive. Oh, I didn't read the part that, okay, I need to read what the president of Germany said. President Frank Walter Steinmeier opened the festival by condemning the Palestinian artists and Documenta curators. He says, I followed the discussions prior to the Documenta very closely about what we must expect from art and also about the, at times, thoughtless and reckless approach to the state of Israel, recognizing Israel is the basis and precondition for this debate. Apparently no Jewish artists or arts from Israel were present at the festival, criticizing and representatives from the, he criticized representatives from the global South for boycotting events featuring Israelis. Clearly, some elements of German society objected to participation of curatorial trajectory of the global South. I call it the global majority. Opening, okay, here I go. Okay, an opening of the Documenta 15 immediately exploded into scandal. Sabine Schurman resigned her position as chief executive. Quote here, the presentation of banner People's Justice by artist collective Taring Padi with its anti-Semitic imagery was a clear transgression, and therefore it significantly harmed Documenta. I have a long quote here, but I don't think I need to read that basically they did not like that the people they had hired to curate, the collective they'd hired to curate the show, what they did. They disagreed. A formal investigation was set about to investigate what had happened, and the findings of the investigation, I'll quote: "The finding committee of the artistic direction of Documenta 15 expresses its support for the recent statement of Ruang-Gruppe, Lumbung members, and contributing artists. We reject both the poison of anti-Semitism and its current instrumentalization, which is being done to deflect criticism of the 21st century Israeli state and its occupation of Palestine." Okay, I'll just end that quote there. I thought the findings were apt and laudable. Apt especially in light of the current moment, 2024 status of the Israeli occupation and genocidal bombings of Palestinians and now Lebanon. Again, I cut out all the terms like ethno-supremacists and things like that because some people might find it offensive. In any case, that's where we're at. What's interesting is that there was a meeting, an interview held post-exhibition, in which Taring Padi, the collective that made this offensive, this is the offending piece. And I'm sorry, there's a flaw on it. I don't know what happened to that, but they don't have a pointy. Does this have a pointy thing? No, it doesn't. But there are the anti-Semites. Some of the characters apparently have the word Mossad on something, and other characters. There's a very small, but the Zionists found it and decided that this was an anti-Semitic piece. By the way, the piece was done in 2002. The exhibition of the show was 2022, so it's 20 years old. It's a 20-year-old work that they were attacking. But the decision was made by the artist collective to take this painting down. First they hid it, they put a sheet over it, and then subsequently they took it down completely. But this is some of their other work. Okay, what I find interesting here is that they've moved away. You know, if you look at these works, they use a different kind of perspective, huh? I mean, in some ways, this is like I showed that very early piece of Madonna and Child, which is 12th century actually, but it was a Madonna Child piece which did not have perspective. These people have not, so they don't come up out of that tradition. In any case, the interview with Taring Padi says, I quote, "We wouldn't be surprised if this documenta is copied superficially. The art world now loves collectivism, after all. We think we fully realize the Ruang-Gruppe's work, but we also see that Ruang-Gruppe's working structure is not adaptable to big dinosaur institutions like, say, the Tate. We can only change superficially things there. This will be the last institutional thing we do. As a collective, we have an internal institutional system as well that is much more rewarding to nurture." Am I running out of time? Okay, then I'll stop there. The interesting thing is that 2 years later, which is this year, let's flip through these. Okay, here we are this year in 2024. This is the Venice Biennale of 2024, entitled "Foreigners Everywhere," Stranieri Ovunque. And this changed everything because it said it made both the artists and the visitors all foreigners. You know, no one was privileged with the position of ownership of land. And the interesting thing about this work is about this. Oh, that's me. Never mind. I did at one point. I thought I would show all kinds of pictures of some of the different things that were there. Let's cut through this. And what's interesting is that these neon signs were everywhere. Okay, all over the Venice Biennale, and everyone thought that the artist's name was someone named Claire Fontaine, but that does not exist. That's a collective name. Okay, so the idea of this single artist, name-branded artist, was being tossed. Okay, I'll stop there. I've got about 20 more pages, but we'll.
Thank you very much, Professor Moy.
And I apologize if I get choked up.
There was an awful lot in that presentation,
Yeah.
and an awful lot of very difficult, contentious, and the political within it. Who said that art wasn't political?
Well, this art was expressively political.
Yes.
Because they were. That's all. I mean, why don't I just you ask questions?
Unfortunately, we don't have time.
Okay, all done.
For questions now.
Okay.
But you are here, and I'm pretty sure we've got quite a lot of questions.
Okay.
For Professor Moy. So what we're going to do maybe is take some. I'm going to allow for 5 minutes because
Okay.
I think we need to. Does anybody have any questions?
I thought you said no questions.
I did. I changed my mind.
Okay. Well,
but I want to collect the questions
Okay.
and ask them.
Okay. While you're collecting, I'll just show some of the stuff that I'll say nothing about these. I'll just show images of things. Okay.
Question, sir.
Right. Thank you, Professor Moy. I'm Evans from Ghana. You mentioned during the movement of the arts how that at some point the artists started, representing religious perspectives. I'm interested in knowing the role of religion in advancing the movement, because you mentioned during the hermeneutical movement the idea that religion lends itself to multiple interpretations and also to symbolisms. I want to know what the role of religion was in advancing the hermeneutic movement.
Okay.
The hermeneutic movement.
The role of religion in the hermeneutic movement. Any other questions?
Oh, okay. You don't know answers yet.
Nope.
Okay.
There's one here.
Yes.
Please wait for the microphone.
First of all, thank you for your presentation, especially under the circumstances, pretty laudable. Secondly, the question is, how do you view this kind of protest artwork and things like Documenta in this increasingly, let's say, normalized political and socioeconomic environment?
I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay, so hermeneutics and religion.
Hermeneutics.
Religion, politics. I'm just going to give you a chance to. Any other question you want to add to that mix? Otherwise, Professor Moy, if you've got 2 minutes.
Okay. What?
To respond.
Answer these two? Oh.
Yes. That's all art is an arrangement of space. There we are. Very good. And you've got 2 minutes. With the microphone.
Friedrich Schleiermacher, look that one up. Schleiermacher really was ultimately a religious scholar, and his focus in the late 18th century was on interpretations of biblical matters that sort of opened opened the world to the notion that things could be interpreted, where previous to that, nothing was interpreted. It was all given, okay? And so if you can interpret the Bible, you can interpret anything. You can interpret the universe and the world. And that's how that happens. It was not expressly an artistic sensibility that drove it, but it was I think, critical. I don't know if that helps you or not, but the earlier stuff, the expressly religious stuff, is really early. It's pre-Renaissance, because all they were talking about was who's important. If you look at the Madonna and Child, there are thousands of those paintings. The most important figure is always the biggest. Doesn't matter if the most important figure is surrounded by people who are bigger. Most important figures, the largest, like in some of the Taring Pading, the Indonesian pieces that I showed, the important figures, the thematic important figures are big, and other people are little. I've made a point of that.
Okay, and then on to the politics. You've done religion, now politics.
Okay. I would like to see this become more prominent. I hope it will become. I think Taring Pading, the collective Taring Pading, actually were probably correct that it's not stuff that's going to sell. In fact, if the later part of the images that I have here, that's an auction house. This is, the gallery and the museum scene is not going to go away. People will still make money. In fact, the paper that I wrote talks about the establishment of art-based loans. So the wealthy can actually now take loans on the art that they own, so they can buy more art, so that it'll appreciate, and they increase the appreciating. I speak of the rentier economy, where the world has moved from industrial production to rentier production, financial increase.